Before I begin, I think it's worth that I should note, because there's been a certain amount of confusion in what sort of routine I'm doing these in. Basically, what I'm doing, the entire plan is for me to do on this particular channel, is I'm doing a Classic Who episode review uh, every week on a Monday, and a new Who episode review every Friday. Now, however, that being said, once I've done one season of Classic Who on a Monday, I shall continue to do the new Who reviews on a Monday and Friday. Once I've done once the reviews of this particular season of Classic Who is complete, and so on and so forth. And then when I've done season one overall of New Who, I will start the process again once I start reviewing season two of the revival series of Doctor Who. I shall also simultaneously be reviewing another season of Classic Who on a Monday. That's the overall plan, anyway. And obviously, basically, what Wednesday Wednesday or Thursday will consist of just basically retro gaming night. However, that isn't as concrete as I want my Monday and Fridays of Doctor Who reviews to be. So basically, the point I'm trying to make is from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is basically an anything can happen sort of day. So that's that basically. Anyway, now in terms of background information upon reviewing Colony in Space, there wasn't an awful lot. There was still a fair amount. There wasn't nothing at all, as I've struggled in the recent past. But there wasn't as much as I anticipated there would be. The only thing that I can really comment on in terms of finding the background information for this particular story is a man called Malcolm Hulke, or Hook. I don't know how you pronounce that. I really do apologise if I've mispronounced that in any way, because he's quite a great actor. He wrote this episode, and his style of writing, it should be noted, it always questioned the viewer as to whether or not do you truly know who the villain of the story was. He recently, for those in the know in terms of classic Doctor Who continuity, he wrote Ambassadors of Space, as I previously stated, another favourite episode of mine. And, spoiler alert, all I'm going to say is those you previously thought was the villain of that story turned out it wasn't. And I thought at the time it was quite edgy. It was, I suppose, from the perspective of 1971, that sort of concept of knowing that maybe the aliens that come to see the human race, maybe they're not necessarily the bad guys. I like that form of storytelling. It always keeps, I feel, it always keeps the viewer on edge or on its feet in terms of really feeling comfortable of knowing which character stands, if you understand where I'm coming from on that one. And I felt, especially considering its time, it was quite ahead in that term, in that concept of structural storytelling. So it also should be noted as well that this story felt like it had two storylines going at once. And what I mean by that is, even though it became exceedingly common, especially on the TV format of series storytelling. I feel like I'm saying storytelling a lot in this video. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, even though it's common now, and it became exceedingly popular in the 90s, the idea of two said storylines going on at the same time, it was practically unheard of in 1971. And I felt like this particular story had that. You had your two stories going in at once. Now, that being said, sometimes in any series, I've seen loads of television programs do this type of structure, this type of storytelling. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I don't mind that type of storytelling as long as the A plot complements the B plot or has the exact same theme. That's the idea of having two separate plots going on at once, is even though the two separate stories, the overall theme, which complements the entire episode, is exactly the same. And like I previously stated, some shows have done this, sometimes it's worked, and sometimes it hasn't. Some people, I suppose, just struggle writing in that format. So that's all I have in terms of background information. Also, apart from the fact, sorry, I did have something else down. This is, for those who are not in the know anyway, this is actually the Doctor's first episode since the Patrick Troughton era that you actually see the TARDIS leave. And it should be noted that I found it quite interesting in his then companion at the time, Jo Grant, Katie Manning's portrayal of Jo Grant, which is she just happens to be one of my particular favourite companions. I might get to that later on another video, but basically the point I'm trying to make is it is quite interesting, isn't it, that even after everything she's seen around the Doctor, she genuinely thought that, that the Doctor's, this box that was in unit headquarters, was just another one of the Doctor's games, almost as if it was saying, you got the impression with Jo that Jo Grant that it was just another quirkiness to the Doctor. She had no idea what the TARDIS was actually capable of doing. She just genuinely, until she actually walked into the TARDIS, she just perceived this as another quirkiness of the Doctor's personality. I found that particularly interesting, even bearing in mind this is after she's experienced a lot with the Doctor in this series alone. Interesting, isn't it? Also, I think it should be noted as well that it took her a while to actually, I don't think believe, I think she, to be honest with you, personally, I've got a theory here. I think she had an idea that the Doctor wasn't from Earth because he knew way too much for the average person to know. She must have known this was a person who wasn't, who wasn't around normal circumstances, or basically what I'm trying to say is whose circumstances wasn't normal. And it's quite interesting, even after seeing the inside of the TARDIS, she still wouldn't believe she was on another planet, and until her feet was on the ground to another planet. Even this is after everything she's seen inside the TARDIS, she still needed that confirmation to believe that everything the Doctor said to her in past episodes, and this particular episode, was the truth. I feel it might be me looking too much into it, but I think this episode above all was, without even, I think, the writer realising it, was a true look into Jo Grant's psyche. Also, I think it should be noted that this particular episode is a hit and miss of Doctor Who fans. It genuinely is. After doing a day's worth, I would say, because I've been busy today, but I knew I was doing this review tonight, and so there was a lot of prep work in beforehand, and the impression I got from this episode from Doctor Who fans that are in the know in the Classic Who series, some of them really hate it, some of them just went over the red, some of them were genuinely on the fence, and some of them really liked it. I have to admit that even though this is a 6-parter, as bizarre as it sounds, I wasn't enjoying it until the Master turned up. It was so bizarre because it seemed as soon as the Master turned up, both plots, like I was previously referencing, both A and B, didn't seem to pick up until the Master turned up, which I thought were pretty much interesting. This is, I didn't want to mention this, but I feel I have to. Basically, for those who haven't watched this, which like I previously stated, I genuinely recommend you watch this episode before you come to my reviews. But again, it's your choice. But I think it's worth mentioning the Time Lords. Now, I know I've sort of touched upon them in my past videos, but this is the first episode, spoiler alert, in a long awaited bunch of episodes that are still to come from this particular episode onwards, that show a certain insight, a less than appealing insight on the Time Lords. Now, I'm not talking in character, I'm not talking about the Time Lord psyche, this, that, or the other, or I'm not even talking in terms of fleshing out the characters that are the Time Lords. No, I'm talking in terms of, and I'm sorry, I know I'm being exceedingly flippant in stating this, but this is just how I felt in watching this episode. It just felt like, to me, this is three men in a warehouse pretending to be advanced aliens. That's just what it looks like. Now, again, understandably, you could argue and say, well, I nearly said my real name then. Well, Dancing Bird, this is 1971. Yes, they didn't have the special effects, this, that, and the other. And that is, yeah, spot on, very valid point, and I'm not dismissing that. But why do you have to involve the Time Lords anyway? Why just have these omnipotent beings, which they were originally were way back when in 1969's War Games, and just say, oh, the Time Lords have made the Doctor's TARDIS go to a particular location and force the Doctor to go to this place and time to do the Time Lord's bidding. That just there, to me, from my perspective alone, insinuates more interesting storytelling than three men. I mean, it was such a bizarre, I want to say prologue or epilogue, I always get them two confused. But basically, it was such a bizarre opening for Doctor Who to have three Time Lords, basically, you know, stating their plans to each other. It almost came across like it wasn't real. And as silly as that sounds, basically the point I'm trying to make is it wasn't believable. People don't talk in like that. And right, the point I'm trying to make is you could tell that scene was just there for the audience. It didn't feel fluid. It didn't feel. Do you know what I'm trying to get at? Basically, the point I'm trying to make is it didn't feel, like I said, realistic. It didn't feel gritty, and it was so obvious that scene was just there just to give the audience information, and that just simply isn't real life. Now, admittingly, I feel I have made this mistake myself, speaking again as an amateur writer, and I've noticed a lot of writers do this. And the overall point I'm trying to make is, I know the viewer's like, oh, for God's sake, he's getting sidetracked again. Believe me, I'm not. There is a point to this. He's basically, you'll probably come across a lot in fiction, is two characters just giving each other information. Now, sometimes it looks believable, sometimes it works. But it only works if it's believable that these characters won't have that set information without the other character talking to them about it first. If you're just if you just have two characters basically giving each other information that they should know anyway, given their current setting, whatever that may be, and it's so oblivious and so obvious that that was just patting to give your audience information, then it's not going to feel natural. That was the word I was looking for. It's just not going to feel natural. And that essentially is what I felt was. Now, without saying too much, I feel I will have to get more in detail on a later video. But I do feel that this is the first of a long series of events that just show, from a creative standpoint, how badly the Time Lords were dealt in this. However, that being said, I did enjoy the concept that even though the Time Lords punish both the Doctor and the Master at one point and exile them both to Earth, it's still quite interesting to see the Time Lords' desire to make the Doctor do their bidding. I think that's quite an interesting take on their psyche, personally speaking. Hang on. I have written other notes. I'm sure I have. Yes, this is it. Now, I feel that this episode, or there's a particular scene in this episode that defines the Master's relationship with the Doctor. And I can, with one quote, and I quote what the Doctor quoted in the last episode in this story, and he says, "You'll never understand." He's saying this to the Master. I'll start again, sorry. "You'll never understand. I want to see the universe, not rule it." That, in essence, I genuinely believe foreshadows the Doctor's relationship with the Master. It's basically that even though the Master and the Doctor, I know previously stumbled upon this, talked about this before, but I feel I have to re-stress it again. The Doctor and the Master are essentially viewed upon in the same light by the Time Lords, but the crucial difference is the Doctor just wants to see the universe, where the Master just wants to conquer all and rule it. And correct me if I'm not mistaken in that ever-growing comments section, but I feel the Doctor actually states to the Master at one point, not in this episode, in a very much later episode, all the way down in David Tennant's episode, is that the Master is so hell-bent in conquering things, to just rule everything, that by using this technique, or whatever technique he uses, it differs every time, to try and rule everything, he actually misses what is actually important in the universe. I think that's quite a very interesting angle, and it ever more so complements the chemistry between Roger Delgado and Jon Pertwee. So I feel overall that's done. It basically, what was going on when I was watching this episode is I didn't write an awful lot of notes. Now that's not necessarily a bad sign. It just means it's a very, what you see is what you get episode. The story, it was convoluted in places, but it was very, I don't mean this in an insulting way, it was very straightforward. And basically, I didn't feel like I had to analyse or review any particular storyline of the episode. Although, apart from the fact, like I previously stated, it just felt like there were two stories going in at once. And I like how Malcolm, I'm not going to try and pronounce his second name again, tied both the storylines together. I thought that was quite neat. So I'm just going to finish off, like every review I have been doing recently, and basically giving you a written review on how I felt of the story, followed by a rating. And I put, this is possibly the most think out of the box format episode since the War Games, with some exciting concepts. However, being in a 6-parter format, I could not help felt the story was slightly slow and convoluted at the beginning. This being said, the act and chemistry between Roger Delgado's Master and Pertwee's Doctor always gives any episode a notch up. This leaves me to give Colony in Space a 7 out of 10. Like always, I hope you enjoyed this review, and peace out.